I'm a 17-year-old girl who would babysit for a family I knew extremely well. My younger sister was friends with the little boy from the family. We'll call him Chris for privacy reasons. I absolutely adored Chris's younger sister Lily, which is the main reason their mother had asked me to babysit for them. I was honestly excited, as I really enjoyed spending time with both kids. Their mom was going out to dinner with friends, and she wouldn't be home until much later in the night. The night of babysitting approached, and everything had been fine. I'd been playing some Minecraft with the two of them for quite a while, and later ordered a pizza for us all to share. Eventually, 9 p.m. approached, and it was the kids' bedtime. The excitement must have wiped them out because they didn't fight me at all. Once they were both asleep in their rooms, I sat on the couch in the living room and watched Netflix. For context, behind the living room is the staircase which leads to upstairs. So from where I was sitting, even though my back was facing it, I could see if someone was standing on the staircase. I was about halfway into an episode of my show when I then heard footsteps descending down the stairs. Assuming it was either Chris or Lily, I called out both of their names. No answer. Either I imagined it, or it was just one of them getting up to use the bathroom or something. I continued to watch my show until I saw something in the reflection of the grandfather clock. Right next to the TV, there was a faint outline of a little girl leaning over the railing of the stairs. I wasn't panicked at all initially, as I figured it was just Lily who had woken up. I turned from the couch to look at the stairs, only to be met with an empty staircase. There was nobody there. I whipped my head back around to face the grandfather clock, and the reflection was gone. I felt my stomach plummet, and my heartbeat started to spike. Unnerved, I paused the TV and looked back at the staircase. Nothing. Maybe the reflection had just been from the TV, and this was all in my head. That was the only plausible explanation. The only way I was going to find out for sure was if I checked both kids. Reluctantly, I got up and I walked up the staircase. I opened the door to Chris's room to find him sound asleep. I then made my way over to Lily's room, only to find her asleep as well. I walked further into her room just to double-check if she was really fully asleep, and she was. My heart still racing, I was just baffled. What the hell had I seen in the reflection if Lily was genuinely asleep? I turned to leave the room only to stop dead in my tracks. There was a girl standing in the hallway, a girl who definitely wasn't Lily. She was sickeningly pale and wearing a white nightgown. I felt like my heart was going to come up my throat, frozen in fear. It took a few seconds to come back to reality, and then slam the door and lock it. My heart is pounding so fiercely, I feel like I'm going to puke. I just stood there, leaning against the door for a solid minute, heart racing and breathing heavy. That's when I then heard a knock on the door, and I jumped, screaming bloody murder. "Hey, it's just me," I heard Chris say from the other side of the door. Instant relief washed over me as I opened the door to see Chris. He just stood there, eyes wide, with this absolutely unnerved expression, clutching his little creeper stuffed animal. "What's wrong?" he asked me quietly. Lily had woken up as well, sitting up in bed with a confused expression. I didn't want to scare either of them, and little kids will panic if they see an adult actually freaked out. So I lied. "I was just watching a scary movie downstairs," I tell them. "When I came up to check on you guys, I guess I was just caught off guard. Sorry for waking you." They both went back to bed, and I returned back downstairs to try and become calm again. I resumed my TV show, and I was reaching the end when I suddenly had the urge to look in the reflection once again. Big mistake. I looked back only to see the clear face of a young girl, the one from the hallway, gaunt black eyes boring straight into me. Without another thought, I immediately sprung off the couch and sprinted up the stairs. I scooped Lily up out of bed and yanked Chris out of his. I fumbled for my car keys out of my bag, my hands shaking, and my mind yelling a million different things at me. I booked it for my car. I don't even remember if I looked down the driveway before peeling out and speeding towards my home. Chris and Lily slept in the guest room in my house that night. I texted the mother that their house had lost power that night, so I had taken them to mine. My family was super close to theirs, so I didn't think it would be a big deal. When she came to pick them up, their mother asked me to babysit again, but I turned her down politely. It's not that I didn't like the kids, there was just no way in hell I was going to deal with that again. A few weeks later, my sister was invited for a playdate with Chris. My parents, their mom, and I were all eating lunch together when Chris and Lily's mom brought up she was looking into moving. She started to complain hearing weird noises and seeing things by the staircase. Shock hit me like a bucket of cold water. Their mom continued on, explaining that she went to go do research on the house and had come across some unsettling things. During the 1920s, a family with 2 daughters lived there. Their youngest had died of pneumonia, and her bedroom was Lily's. Previous owners of the house had complained of the same things. I wasn't crazy, but I would be if I ever went back into that house again. It was Sunday, July 21st. Summer was just getting over and going back into school, which sucked because I dreaded school because of the fact you have to wake up early, so I'm not much of a morning person. My parents went to work one day and I was stuck home alone. I was sitting on my couch watching this YouTuber I found called Darkness Prevails or something like that. As I'm watching this cool video, I hear someone cough upstairs. "What the hell?" I say as I stand up and try to listen for it again, and fair enough, I heard it again. My stomach turned and my adrenaline started rushing. Then I hear fast footsteps coming down my stairs, but nothing was there, so I grabbed my dad's handgun and I sat at the corner of my room until my parents got home. At around 9 p.m., both my parents got home at the same time. Since they work at the same place, I felt a relief. As I heard that door, I quickly hid the gun I was sitting with and went back to the couch like nothing happened. I don't know why I didn't tell my parents about this situation, but I just didn't. "What are you still doing out of bed?" my mom says. So as I rolled my eyes and went to bed, as I'm going to my stairs, it gets super cold, but I decided to ignore and head to bed. I'm a little unsettled because of what happened earlier, but I just came up with excuses to tell myself to make myself feel better, so I just hit the sheets. I was 3:15 a.m. I wake up to a chuckle. As I wake up, I thought I was just hearing things, so I closed my eyes to try and go to sleep again. 10 minutes later, I hear the same chuckle, but I heard it twice in a row. It had the same tone of voice, like it was a recording being played. I didn't want to open my eyes, but I had it inside my bedroom, so I squint open my eyes, and what I saw terrified me. I saw this black mass standing in my closet. The outline looked like someone's arms were down by their side and legs perfectly together, but there was no features on the thing. I don't know why, but I said, in an angry but tired voice, "What the hell do you want? I'm not afraid to die, so calm on." I don't know why I said this, but I tried closing my eyes, but I opened them back up. This shadow was in a different position. Its upper body was completely bent to the side at a 90-degree angle, while its legs were still standing still. "What the hell do you want, you bastard?" I said. Then I heard a woman's scream coming from this thing. I don't know how my parents weren't waking up right after it stopped screaming. I ran at me and then disappeared in the dark. It was like it went through me. I never saw that thing again, thank God. But I still think about that scary situation till this day, and I never told my parents about it, and they never heard the scream. Later I started to look into the history of the home because of my curiosity of that incident. I see this thing that says something about a man dying in this household. But as I read that, I hear the same exact cough that I heard last time coming from behind me. Let me start by saying that my family has always had a knack for sensing spirits and other entities, especially my mother. She realized she could sense things when she was about 15, but that's another story for another time. This story starts back in the 90s when I was 11 years old. Me, my mother, and my older brother, who was 13 at the time, lived out in the boonies on a 5-acre plot of land in central Indiana. Our house sat roughly 50 yards back from the road, and behind it was a 2-story garage, a pond with a shed. And behind that was an old wooden shack with a patch of woods behind that to finish out our land. When we initially moved in, my mother told us to stay out of that shack because we were going to use it for any excess trash we had, or any trash that was too big to be put out at the road, and raccoons and other animals would most likely be out there. So we didn't. We had all that land to roam around and play. We didn't need to mess around in there. We had plenty of other things we could do. So a little time passes with us living in this house, and we start to experience your typical ghostly encounters like footsteps or gusts of wind where there shouldn't be. Things like that. My mother told us not to worry, it was only the ghost of a little girl that had drowned in the pond out back years ago, and to not worry about her, she's harmless. My mother even gave her a name. We called her Libby. Now Libby would do to us what your typical little girl would do, like poke us and run around the corner and hide. Things little kids do when they play. I was so young at the time that it always kind of scared me, but my mother would reassure me that everything is fine and not to worry. There was only one time that I ever actually seen Libby, and to this day, this memory is etched into my brain. It was about a year into us living there when this happened. Me and my cousin, let's call him Tyler. Me and Tyler were in the game room playing GameCube one night. Now, the game room had a big glass window that looked out into the backyard and the pond. So, as we were playing video games, I just happened to glance out the window, and I see what looks like a little girl that couldn't be more than 5 years old, standing under the pond light, with her back to the house staring out at the pond. She had jet black hair and was wearing a white dress with red polka dots, and she had a little red bow in her hair. By this time, I've had enough encounters to know that if this is a ghost, and if I look away, there's a good chance it will disappear when I look back. So without taking my eyes off of her, I pause the game and tell Tyler to get up and look to make sure what I was seeing was actually there. Now Tyler doesn't know about the Libby situation, so when he looks, he's not expecting to see a little girl standing there. So he starts freaking out, asking me who that is. Why is she out there in the middle of the night? Where are her parents? Things like that. All very reasonable questions. As he's asking me, the little girl slowly starts to turn around to look back at the house, and as soon as I am about to see her face, boom, she disappears. That was it for us that night. We turned the game off, laid down, and watched a funny movie to help us go to sleep. Now, fast forward another year or so, and we have become so accustomed to Libby that it doesn't bother any of us anymore. One summer day while my mother is at work, me and Tyler are outside fishing and catching garter snakes and just overall being adventurous on our property. We decide that, after me living here as long as I have and never even taking a peek inside that old shack, that we should go check it out. So we make the small hike back to the shack and we go in. When we open the door and go inside, there is some trash in there, but not a whole bunch like we thought. What was in there was an old wooden bed frame, a wooden dresser, and what looked like a little wooden baby crib that neither of us had ever seen before. They were very old and almost looked handmade. Now Tyler and I, being the rambunctious teenage boys we were, figured that all these things were just trash like everything else in there, so we started throwing stuff around and breaking things and just tearing stuff up. Boys being boys. After we had our fun, we went back inside to get drinks and hang out. Once my mother got home from work, she immediately barged in the front door so mad that she was yelling at us before she even got through the door, asking us why we went out messing around in that shack and what did we do. At the time, we didn't understand how she knew because that had been hours ago, and she was in a completely different town at work. But nonetheless, she knew and she was irate. So we apologized and offered to go clean it up, but she told us to just leave it alone and stay inside. After that day, we never heard or felt Libby again, and I started to become very depressed and started having real trouble controlling my emotions. At first I just figured it was me going through puberty because I was at that age. But after about a week or two of this, I started feeling like everywhere I went, I was being watched. And not in a protective way. Each day it got worse and worse, until one night I was in bed watching my TV about to go to sleep, and I kept getting this feeling like I wasn't alone. So I look over at the sliding closet door in my bedroom. Now, the sliding door was broken so it wouldn't shut all the way, and when I looked over, all I could see was a pair of red eyes. Not like glowing red eyes either, like a dark, barely able to see red eyes just staring at me. No figure, no body, just eyes. And it terrified me to that point that I started sleeping in the living room and couldn't go in my bedroom anymore. About 6 months after this happened, we moved out of that house, and it took my mother years to tell me what actually happened that day and how she knew about the shack. What she told me was the very first day we moved there, she sensed something evil connected to that shack. That's why she told us to leave it alone, and once I went out and destroyed that bed frame and that baby crib, whatever evil was out there moved into my bedroom, and we moved because my mother was afraid of what was happening to me because of it. Back then, I didn't make the connection, but looking back I realized what happened. Now, I'm telling this story because ever since we lived in that house, not only have I developed my own sense of feeling for these things, but also every house I've ever lived in since then, I have had continuous, unexplainable paranormal activity happen. Even the house I live in now, 20 years later as a grown man with children of my own. Every apartment, every house, every building I've lived in has had these issues. And it makes me wonder, has whatever that thing was I angered as a child been following me for the past 20 years? Tormenting me at every stop? Was there ever really a Libby? Or was it that thing posing as an innocent child to infiltrate our family and feed off of our energy? I guess it's up to me to find out. I grew up in a challenging environment. My mother left my father when I was very young, and we were left in a difficult situation. My father had to work 2 jobs to make enough money to pay our monthly rent, which meant he was rarely home. As a result, from the age of about 8, I was often left on my own, practically raising myself until I eventually left home for college. Luckily, I was granted a scholarship which allowed me to go to college. I spent my college years studying wildlife biology, a lifelong interest of mine. I was always fascinated by the way animals survived and thrived with each other. After years of hard work, I finally earned my master's degree in wildlife. I started looking for available jobs in my area, but couldn't find any within 30 miles of my hometown. Eventually, I did find a position opening in the town of Dallas, Texas. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that I possibly wouldn't have to move out of state if I landed this job. So I sent in an application, and the next day I was asked to have an interview. A few days later, I took the drive up to Dallas and interviewed with the company. They told me they would be glad to employ me, and I gratefully accepted the offer. I took the time up in Dallas to look around for homes in the area, and I eventually settled on an apartment complex in downtown Dallas. A few months later, I made the move. The apartment was small, but just enough for a man and his bed. I lived my life happily in that apartment for 3 long years before I decided to propose to my girlfriend Sarah. She said yes, and we got married a few months later. We eventually moved out of the tiny apartment and bought a small house. Fast forward a few years, and we have 2 beautiful baby girls and are both stressed out. The traffic of the area was too much to be driving in every day with 3 screaming kids in the back, and the house was getting cramped. We decided that we couldn't take this lifestyle anymore, so we made the executive decision to move somewhere more peaceful. I wanted to keep my job, so we only moved a couple of miles away to the town of Mansfield. It was only about a 20-30 minutes drive from my office and provided a much more laid-back city experience. We bought a beautiful home in a gated community off of the highway with the help of my wife's parents. The neighborhood was small and maybe had 30 homes inside of it. All of the homes were lovely large houses with pretty large trees in their yards, perfect for me as a nature enthusiast. We eventually moved into the house, and our kids loved it. Our neighbors probably hated it. We never got to know one of our neighbors, but the other neighbors were extremely kind. They were an elderly couple who had never had kids. They eventually became adopted grandparents to our kids and were thought of as family. Like I said, the kids loved the house, and so did my wife and I. The house had 4 bedrooms and a large living room and kitchen. There was also a pool and a hot tub in the backyard which overlooked the creek that went behind our house. The creek was called Hogpen Branch, and it ran throughout the town and emptied into Walnut Creek. The river was small and was only about 4 feet deep behind our house. Every once in a while we would go watch the turtles swim around, and my daughters loved it. A few years passed, and my daughters were finally old enough to be left alone, which meant I had time to finally learn how to golf. Just across the creek was a really nice golf course. After a few weeks of playing, we invested the money to buy a golf cart. It wasn't the fanciest, but just enough to get you around the course. One night during the summer, my wife decided to take the girls out on a girls' night. Of course, being the 6-year-olds they were, they rubbed it in my face. I went along with it and acted super jealous. However, I was excited to have the house to myself for a night. I eventually decided to go golfing before the sun set. It was probably 6 o'clock or so I still had plenty of time. I got ready to leave the house and hopped in the golf cart. In order to get to the greens, you had to drive down the street and go through a little alley nestled between 2 houses. It was a short drive before you got to the cart path, which had a little bridge running over Hogpen Branch. This was where I had my first strange occurrence. As I was going over the bridge, I heard a splash. With me being the nature lover I am, I jumped out of my cart and leaned over the edge, trying to see what was there. To my surprise, there was nothing there. Unlike the creek further upstream, it was fairly clear here. Not anything like the waters of Florida, but I could see the bottom. But there was nothing there, not a fish, not a turtle, not anything. However, I didn't mind it. All I could focus on was golf at the time, so I dismissed it as someone skipping stones upstream. I golfed for maybe 2 hours before it got too dark to see the ball. I packed up my clubs and began to take the drive back home. The pathway was long and took me a good 5 minutes to drive down. I was starving and planned on cooking burgers for myself later that night. As I was driving along the trail, I noticed a few balls someone had forgotten to get out of the sand trap. I needed some more balls, so I went to retrieve them. As I bent over to pick up the golf balls, I heard a loud shriek. I glanced in the direction of the noise and saw nothing except for trees and the bridge in the distance. I stared in the direction looking for maybe an injured animal. I initially thought it could have been a fox cry due to its distinct sound of a human scream. Eventually, a thought clicked in my head. I had thought that there was possibly an animal struggling that could have fallen in the water when I heard the splash. Though it had been a while since I heard the noise, foxes are known to be strong swimmers. I jumped in my cart and sped over to the bridge, which was maybe 100 yards away, hoping to be able to save an animal's life. However, when I arrived at the bridge, there was nothing there. I searched under the bridge and all around the area, but there was nothing. I thought it was odd, but dismissed it and hopped back into my cart. I drove home and cleaned up. By the time I had showered and gotten ready to grill a few patties, it was already dark. I grabbed some meat from the fridge and headed outside. I cleaned off the grill and threw a few patties onto it. I put on some music and sat back and watched the flames turn the red meat brown. I stood up and walked over to flip the patties, but just as I was about to flip one, I heard a screech. The sound made me jump. I flipped the patties and walked over to the creek, only to find absolutely nothing. At this point, I was getting creeped out, so I got my finished patties off the grill and headed indoors. I made my burgers how I liked them and sat down at the dining table. The table faced the window, and I stared out at the dark yard, only illuminated by the porch lights and the blue hue of the pool's lights. I saw nothing the entire time I ate my burgers and sat in silence. My silence was only broken by the arrival of my family. They came in exhausted from their night. The kids came over to me, gave me a hug, and then went upstairs to get ready for bed. I sat at the table thinking, I probably look so creepy, as I intensely glared out the window. My thoughts were only confirmed when my wife asked, "What's wrong?" I answered her, "I'm not sure, I've just been hearing things. I thought it might have been an animal like a fox or something, but now, I'm not so sure." she replied. Well, what did it sound like? I said, it sounded just like a fox, which sounds sort of like a human scream, but when I looked for whatever made it, I couldn't find anything. She sort of just looked at me, then simply replied with, weird. We sat there for a moment before we heard one of our daughters say, Dad, why is Mimi in the backyard? Mimi was our neighbor, who the girls thought of as their grandma. What? My wife said quietly. We looked towards the yard and saw an elderly woman standing by the creek bed. The lights hardly illuminated her, but from what we could see, it was Mimi. I stood up. Why is she out there? Sarah said. I don't know, but I'm going to find out, I said. I threw on my sandals and went out the back door. Hello, Mary? Are you okay? Do you need anything? None of my questions were answered. The woman just stood there, back towards me, staring into the water. As I got closer, I noticed the awful smell of the woman. She smelled like stagnant water, a smell that smells like rotten eggs and decay. Mary, do you need something? My question was never answered. I then turned and walked towards the house. I met my wife in the kitchen. She was still looking out at the woman. Maybe you should go let Bob know that she's out here, she said. Yeah, good idea. I'll go over, you go tuck the kids in and just tell them she was looking for something, I said. She agreed and I went to our neighbor's house. I rang the doorbell once and Bob answered the door. He seemed excited that I was over even though it was late at night. He told me to come in and asked if I wanted anything. Do you want a drink or a beer or anything? Mary can get it for you, he said. Mary then peeked her face around the corner of the kitchen. Hey, Mary, what were you looking for outside? I asked. Excuse me? She asked. You were in our backyard a couple of minutes ago. I was just wondering if you needed help finding something back there, I said. The couple went silent. Then they looked over at each other. So you saw her? Bob said. Yeah, I'm not mad. I just need to know if you dropped something in the creek so I can help you get it, I said. No, honey, that wasn't me. But we know exactly who you're talking about. We call her Margaret. We see her every now and then, Mary said. Wait, so who is she? I asked. Well, that's what we're trying to find out for ourselves. We do know, however, that she is not kind. One time Bob went out to ask her who she was, and she just screamed in his face. He fell over, and when he looked back at her, she was gone. Mary explained to me. Where are the kids? Bob asked me. They're in the house, I replied. Oh, you need to get home now. Mary told me. I didn't even question why, I just bolted out the door. I ran to our house, and when I burst in the front door, it was eerily quiet. But one horrifying detail I noticed is that the back door was wide open. I had forgotten to lock the door. You kind of grow out of the habit of locking doors at night when you live in a gated community you trust so much. Sarah, I screamed. Nobody answered. I sprinted upstairs to my daughter's room where I found all three girls huddled in the closet crying. What happened? Are y'all okay? I exclaimed. She's in the house. The lady is in the house. And it's not Mary Josh. It's not Mary. My wife cried to me. I know. I said, but it's okay. I'm here now. Just then I heard a thump from the stairs. Josh, my wife cried. At this point my daughters were sobbing. Daddy, is she going to hurt us? My daughter cried. No, I'm not going to let that happen, I said confidently. I might have appeared brave to my family, but I was on the verge of tears. I heard another thump. I wanted to stay in the closet with my family, but as the man of the house, I had to do something. I grabbed my daughter's softball bat, which was lead against the corner in the closet, and gripped it hard. I slowly walked out of the room, prepared to knock the crap out of whoever was threatening my family. I rounded the corner and looked down the stairs. There, on the third step up, was a woman. The woman was staring at me. Her dress was a dark, dirty gray color, and her hair was a dark black color and dripping wet. Her eyes were black, and her mouth was still. I just stood there. I couldn't do anything. After what seemed like hours of staring, the woman slowly backed down the stairs and walked out of view. Then after a few more moments, the back door shut. What? "The hell," I said out loud. My mind was racing. Who was that? And why the heck did she come into my house? I had never believed in the paranormal. But had I just seen a ghost? I then remembered my family was waiting for me to return. I ran back to the closet and embraced my family. "It's okay. It was just Mimi," I told my daughters. I gave my wife a look, and she went along with the white lie. We sat there for a moment before everyone's adrenaline went down, and the girls began to become sleepy again. We asked them if they wanted to go sleep at Mimi's and Bob's house that night, and they excitedly said yes. We packed small bags and began walking to their house. Before we left, though, I double-checked every single lock in the house. I also made sure the lady was actually gone. She was, but the water droplets she left were not. We ran over to their house quickly, terrified of what we might see outside. Luckily, we made it safely. "What were you doing at our house?" my daughter asked Mary. Mary glanced at my wife and I, and we gave her a look, letting her know that she needed to lie to them. "I was just looking for sugar. I made cookies. They're in the kitchen," she said sweetly. The girls ran into the kitchen. "Thank you," I said. "Of course. So is everyone all right? Tell us what happened," Mary stated. We told Bob and Mary the story, and they were shook. They had seen the woman several times before, but never thought the woman would go inside anyone's house. That night, the girls fell asleep quickly in the living room on the floor. However, the four adults could not sleep a blink. We all talked about our experience, and I told everyone what I saw at the bottom of the stairs. I also told Mary and Bob my experiences from earlier that day. We tried finding information about it online, but there was nothing. The next day we took a trip to the public library and asked if we could go through old documents. We got permission and spent all day going through files of papers. Eventually, my wife found a paper from the year 1907. The article she pointed out reported that a woman was found dead in a creek in town. The article had very little detail and didn't specify who the woman was or which creek it was. However, we allowed ourselves to believe that this was the woman who we came in contact with. After that night, we lived in constant fear. My job eventually caused us to move to Georgia, where my wife and I now live. Our daughters are both now in college and have no idea what actually happened that night. As for Bob and Mary, they lived in that house up until a year ago. Now they live in a much newer house in a different city. They have told us that they saw Margaret a couple of times since the incident. We can only hope that the woman is at rest now and will not terrorize anyone else who lives along that creek. I still have questions, though, like, why did the woman need to open the door if she was a spirit? And how did she leave physical water droplets on the floor if she was just a spirit? Or maybe this wasn't a ghost at all and was just some jerk teenagers pulling a prank on us. If you have any feedback on what you think it was, please let us know. Thank you, and God bless. Folklore is a curious thing. Tales passed down through generations, stories that have defied the passage of time. Why do some stories fade with the embers of the campfire, while others burn on forever? I believe that for a story to become folklore, it has to have a universal lesson, and above all, truth. Sure, some of the story becomes embellished like a game of telephone, but the message remains the same, and the truth is somewhere between the dramatic pauses and jump scares. We, as listeners, can feel that truth, the belief that the storyteller has in what they are saying, and that sticks with us. It follows us home and demands that we retell the story. There's something about saying it out loud that makes it lighter, makes it a little less believable. But we know better. I'd like to share with you a folktale from my neck of the woods, and the night that it became real for me. My grandfather used to tell us the story on hot summer days as we sat on his porch, watching the sun go down and the night start to creep in from the woods. "Now y'all listen well. This is no mere ghost story," he'd always open with. "This is truth with a little bit of bite to it. Many years ago, there was a family that lived out in these parts that was moving closer to town. They had been hauling stuff back and forth all day. The father was driving the pickup truck, the brother was riding shotgun, and the daughter, Looney, was in the back with the furniture, keeping it from flying off. Well, as they were going over that bridge just down the way, he'd point down the road. We all knew the bridge. Everyone had to cross it to get to town. Something just awful happened. The wind caught one of those heavy pieces just right and took it over the side of the truck, and little Looney right along with it. Poor thing, as she went over, got swept under the tire of that truck, and it took her head clean off and shot it straight up and over the bridge, sending it down into the black water of the swamp below. Now, everyone knows it's bad to bury a body incomplete. The spirit won't rest if it's not together. So everyone pitched in to help look for her missing head, so the family could bury her whole and little Looney's spirit could rest in peace. But try as everyone did, they never could find her head. And to this day, her head has never been found. It's still out there at the bottom of those murky waters somewhere. And they say if you cross Looney's bridge at night, she'll jump on your car looking for her head. And if you don't hurry up and drive across, she might just take yours. He would always then follow up with the story of his farmhand, Ike. My grandfather would say, Ike had a run-in with Looney's ghost once. Ike, a superstitious type, lived on the other side of Looney's bridge, and he had to cross it every day to and from my farm. Knowing Ike's fear of crossing the bridge at night and his daily 3-mile walk, I, being fond of Ike, began letting him take the tractor home. It helped Ike cross the bridge faster and eased his nerves. One night, Ike was heading home from the farm, and he was about halfway across Looney's bridge when the tractor started to putter and grind, then came to a jerking stop. It broke down for no good reason. Ike kept trying to start it up, but the tractor was dead. He told me he felt it in the air first. The air felt charged, like electricity surging all around him. His skin tightened with goosebumps, and his hairs began to prickle up. Then the tractor gave a big bounce up and down as if something huge had just jumped on it. Ike then felt what he described as hundreds of spider webs falling around his neck, slithering and crawling up towards his face. That's when he smelled it, the dank, rotten smell of swamp mud. As the sensation spread across his cheeks, his vision started to blur, as if lines of something were starting to cover his eyes. He jumped off the tractor and ran as fast as he could to cover the remaining distance over the bridge. When he reached the end, he turned and saw the tractor bounce up and down again as if something had jumped off it. Ike quit his job at my farm the next day, and I had to go get the tractor left on the bridge because he wouldn't even go back out there in the daylight. I used to love that story. I would beg him to tell it to me over and over again. I must have heard it hundreds of times. Eventually, my childhood fear of the ghost girl and her bridge got lost in the familiarity, and the legend became mundane for me. That is, until the legend showed me just how real it was. Fast forward a few years. As a teenager, I would sneak out of the house in the middle of the night and take my golf cart to steal road signs. My buddy had a boys' cave in the loft of his dad's old barn, where we kids would hang out. We decorated it with all the signs we took. One afternoon, as summer vacation was nearing its end, we were all hanging out in the loft when my friends got a great idea. You should take one of the signs from Looney's bridge. Now that would be sick. One of them followed up. I shared glances with them, but didn't answer. Come on, you have to do it, my friend urged. Yeah, after all, you live the closest, another chimed in. It's literally a stone's throw away from your house. Right, you'll be in and out quick, someone added. Just make sure Looney doesn't catch you, he mocked, as he pulled his shirt above his head and stretched his arms out towards my face, and they all started to snicker. Now, I wasn't afraid of that bridge, but there was something that just felt icky about it. Going out there in the middle of the night was one thing, but to vandalize it seemed like begging for trouble. Still, I knew I couldn't back down, or else they would never let me hear the end of it. Sure thing, I shot back with a smirk, and so it was decided. I was going to Looney's bridge, and I wouldn't come back empty-handed. It was late. The night was hot, the air sticky as I crawled out of my bedroom window with my bag of tools. I made my way to the backyard, unplugged the golf cart, and then I was off. As I raced down the road towards the bridge, the air rushing past my face helped me tolerate the thick, muggy night. As I approached the bridge, the darkness pressed in on all sides, and I could see my headlights bouncing off the vibrant yellow stripes of my prize. The sign was the kind with alternating black and yellow stripes that mark the entrances and exits of bridges. I started closing in on Looney's Bridge, but my golf cart started acting up, picking up speed before slowing to a crawl. The headlights dimmed and flickered, and then the cart came to a jerking stop at the entrance of the bridge, plunging me into complete darkness. "Crap," I muttered. The battery must be dead, but that didn't make sense. It was on the charger before I took it out, and I'd barely been riding it. I kept trying to start it, but nothing. I turned the key, pushed the pedal, but there was no response. The lights wouldn't work either. Then, suddenly, the lights on the golf cart started flashing on and off by themselves. They would flicker on, illuminating the length of the bridge with the bright yellow sign reflecting the light back at me, blinding me, and then whoosh back off, throwing me into darkness again. I felt it in the air like electricity or static. Then I heard it, the sound of water. Not splashing, but like something was moving around in the swamp below, followed by the trickle of water droplets. Whoosh! The lights kicked on again, lighting up the bridge. Except this time, it wasn't empty. In the middle of the bridge lay a blonde, yellowish blob of something that I couldn't quite make out at first, though unconsciously I think I knew what it was before my mind could accept it. It was a thick pile of blonde hair. My heart raced, and my chest tightened as the yellow blob started to move. Pieces of hair began to arch from the ground, one strand at a time, like static charged threads. Slowly, the strands continued to rise from the road, stretching up towards the sky. At first, they lifted individually, then in clumps, until what had been a matted pile of hair revealed a portion of a face and a single open eye staring back at me. Whoosh! The lights went out again, and darkness swallowed me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel that it could see me. It was watching me from the black expanse. I frantically tried to start the golf cart, slamming the key from off to on, off to on, off to on, constantly pumping the pedal. I only stopped when I began to hear the sound of something dragging across the pavement just ahead of me. It wasn't constant. It came in waves. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause, scrape. Each dragging crunch grew louder and closer. I was hyperventilating. I felt like I was choking on the air. I kept trying to start the golf cart, and finally, it worked. The lights kicked on, and the cart jolted forward with a slam of the pedal. I clicked the switch into reverse, swung it around, and heard a loud splash as I peeled away from Looney's Bridge. Now grown with kids of my own, I often get asked to tell that story, and on cold nights around the campfire, I always oblige. There's something about telling a story that makes it seem less real. Maybe it's the company of the listeners, the giggles of relief when the story's over, or the way they ask, "Is it real?" before bed, and I reply, "No, it's just a story. Now go to sleep." Perhaps that's what makes a story become folklore, a tale that insists on being shared, hiding the truth in the disbelief of the listener, hoping to share in that disbelief with them. But we, the storytellers, know better, and so do the listeners. We all know ghost stories only have a little bite when they have teeth. So it was a sunny day, and I decided to go biking with my best friend. Let's call her Mona for the sake of this story. We go biking often, as there's not much to do in the summer, and we live at opposite sides of town, so it's an easy way for a quick meetup for 5-6 hours. We usually meet up from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. and leave at 7-8 p.m. It's lots of fun, even if we just eat snacks at a nearby park. We usually have plans, but sometimes we don't do anything else except play in the park. We went to go buy snacks, and then went to the park that we always go to. To get to the park, you have to ride through our school garden. And as we were riding through the school garden, Mona said she saw a figure inside the school. I honestly didn't believe her and thought she was lying because it was 8 p.m. and was trying to make things scary. I also thought it could have been her shadow or she was seeing things. After playing in the park for a while, we both had to use the restroom. We weren't about to pee in a bush, so we decided to go back to our school. We arrived at the school quickly because the park is close to the school. We tried to open the doors, but they were locked. Then we rang the doorbell and Mona told me the sound reminded her of a nightmare. That's when we noticed the hall light was on. "That's weird. It shouldn't be on. It's motion detected," I said. Another thing I noticed after she rang the doorbell, which she hadn't seemed to notice until I pointed it out, was the banging from a window in the school. It sounded like someone aggressively shut the window, but I didn't remember it being open when we first arrived there. She rang it again and I heard another bang. This time I was looking in the direction of where the sound had came from and the window was shut. We were certain no one was inside the school because otherwise they would have already opened the door for us since we rang it twice. So I told her about the banging and we kept ringing the doorbell to see if it would happen again. Anytime we rang the doorbell, there would come a bang, sometimes more than one. At one point we started recording and the banging actually calmed down. That scared me even more. Not even a minute after we stopped recording, people walked by. There was another bang. As we had just rang the doorbell, I heard them say, "Oh wow, the window was open." I don't know why, but this made me angry. There were clearly no windows open, and even if there would have been, that wouldn't explain it shutting by itself since there was no wind. We kept ringing the doorbell, but because it only came from one direction, I started to think it was someone playing a prank. I didn't know how or who, but I just thought it was a prank. But at one point when we rang the doorbell, the bangs went from one side of the school to another in under a second. This was what really got us, so we decided we'd try to catch whatever it was banging the windows. We rang the doorbell and ran far enough away so that we could see every window that had been hit. Nothing. We heard the sounds, but we didn't see anything. We rang the doorbell again and we were right in front of a window that got hit. But nothing. Not a single sign of anything. The glass wasn't even shaking. My dad called me a little while after the banging completely stopped, and I was kind of scared to ride home, but I made it home safely. Since that time we've been biking maybe twice, and both times we rang the doorbell, but there was no banging. What do you think it was? Our overreactive imagination, a ghost, a demon. Do you think our school is haunted? I don't know what it was, but I'll say, in the moment I wasn't scared. I like scary encounters. They leave good stories to tell around the campfire with your friends and family in the middle of the night. I never believed in the paranormal. Whenever I got to so-called haunted places, nothing would happen. I was a skeptic for a long time. One day, however, that all changed. You see, in October of 2022, I met and quickly fell in love with my boyfriend, Zach. Zach's been sensitive to the paranormal since he was a toddler. He had all kinds of encounters, from seeing his dead grandfather to having really weird shit happen. Whispers, footsteps, and other weird noises. But no one was there. The worst experience he ever had was being tormented by the demon Moloch. If you don't know who that is, I'll explain the lore. He's a demon that children were sacrificed to. He's also known as the Child Eater. Anyway, my boyfriend was attacked by him as a child. It was so bad his grandfather got a priest to bless the house. Everything was quiet for a very long time, and now for some unknown reason, Moloch came back after Zach and I started dating. And he's becoming more of a threat than ever. I guess it's because he never went away. He must have just became weak from the blessings from the priest all those years ago, and is now back for revenge. It started with small things like things falling by themselves and whispers. But soon it got even more intense. There's bruises and scratches from an unseen force on my body and seeing a woman in white. I would wake up to odd noises, but nothing was there. It's scary as hell. I have no idea what to do. He gets rid of the evidence and makes me look insane. I wish I knew how to stop this haunting, but how can I if no one will believe me when I try to talk about it? I can't talk about it. I tried to tell Mom, but she thinks I made it up. She says, "I believe that you believe," and how she thinks I'm in Fantasyland. I fucking hate it. Maybe I'll start talking about it on here, or at least keep a journal talking about these strange and terrifying events that Zach and I have been going through for almost 2 years. We're about to be dating for 2 years also. I've been waking up between midnight to 4 a.m. the past few nights, and each time it was to something so fucked up it would chill me to the bone. I wish someone would listen to Zach and I. I wish someone would believe us. I need to vent this out. I need to get it out. Demons are real. It's not made up. Demons are real and all around us. This story is 100% true. No one can change my mind about that. I'm not a crazy person. I'm just trying to warn you all and pray that you'll heed this warning. If you hear weird noises and nothing's there, especially at night. If you hear whispers, but can't make out what it's saying. If your pet is acting weird and barking or hissing at nothing, you have an evil spirit eye your home. Please be open-minded when you hear or read this story and heed my warnings. I don't want you guys to go through this hell too. I don't want you to be seen as a crazy person. Trust me, it's not fun. It's very scary and serious. Please don't ignore this story. My story is to save you from what I'm going through. Like I said before, had a hard time believing in ghosts until I met my boyfriend and started to experience weird things with him and on my own. I can't explain it, but for some weird reason, Mom is also seeking stuff. But it doesn't really bother her the way it bothers Zach and I. I guess it's because she never saw or went through as much fear and oppressive feelings and encounters as Zach and I. We all have seen a woman in white, which proves there's a haunting happening. Mom told me she doesn't think the woman is evil, though. I'm not so sure about that. For the past few nights I've been waking up around 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. Weird stuff would happen. A couple nights ago I kept getting branded with the letter M in my name, but also the number 13 and the word it. There was a triangle shape too. Last night I had a terrifying dream that felt so real. I was attacked by a demon in a horrible way that I can't say because it's too disturbing. I feel unsafe and I feel like I'm marked. I feel like there's something weird happening to me also. I might be losing my sanity or feel crazy. I hope that we can figure out a way to cast him out for a good, so he won't bother us anymore. I would hate to have a kid and have terrible events if the supernatural hurting and stalking them. It's terrifying to think about how much worse things can possibly get for us. I don't want to think about it. I wanted to know why Moloch was after us and what he wants. Zach said to not talk to it because talking to an evil spirit opens a door and makes them stronger. I still can't figure out why the word it was put on my body. Was it a warning that he'd go after our kid if Zach and I decided to he parents one day? Today, I'm thinking about whether or not I should write a book about all this, or if by some miracle my story will be good enough to get out in the open. I want people to hear my story and know that demons are real. It's no joke. I need someone to believe us. Zach and I are not crazy. It's July 10th, 2024, and I had the dream about being attacked last night. I'm not sure why. I guess it was a threat from Moloch or something else. It was a shadow demon of some sort. I don't know what it was, but it scared the hell out of me. I know it was a shadow demon, but I don't know who it was really. I don't know if it was Moloch or some other demon. I'm not even sure what to think of all this stuff anymore. I feel like that song Control by Hasley, or even American Nightmare by Ice Nine kills. The reason why is because all my life I've been tormented by horrible dreams. Please heed my warning. Please take this story seriously. I know it's crazy to believe, but this is all true. This is part 2 to my story, The Wrath of Moloch. There might be more as time goes by. I hope this will all get better soon. I don't want this to happen anymore to Zach and I. I don't want anyone else to go through this terror either. Please be careful. I was born and raised in the city of Belém. My early years were spent in my grandparents' house on the outskirts, almost in the neighboring town of Ananindeua. My childhood was quite normal until a series of life-changing events unfolded. My grandpa passed away, my parents divorced, and my grandma succumbed to Alzheimer's. These events led my father to move into a house located in the heart of Belém. This house, built by my grandmother in the 70s, would soon become the source for a series of bizarre occurrences. To give you a clearer picture, the house started with a large front yard and 2 doors that opened into the kitchen and living room. From the kitchen, a long corridor extended, leading to bedrooms, a service room, another kitchen, and a backyard. The corridor formed a T-shape, with the left side ending in the last bedroom and the right leading to the backyard. When my father first moved into this house, strange things began to happen. He kept these occurrences to himself, recording them meticulously in a diary, which we discovered after his passing in 2006. His entries described hearing people screaming and banging his bedroom door in the dead of night. He also saw shadowy figures moving through the T-shaped corridor, darting from right to left. Even the maids who worked during the day reported seeing these shadows. When my father passed away and my mother and I moved into the house, the odd occurrences continued for everyone except me. This left me frustrated, as I was eager to experience something supernatural, something that would confirm there was more to the world than just the physical realm. I delved into various forms of occultism and spiritual practices, Gnosticism, Voodoo, Luciferian rituals, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, but nothing ever manifested before my eyes. Meanwhile, my mother, grandmother, and the maids continued to witness shadowy figures moving from room to room. Life went on. My mother was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2012, and in 2013, my daughter was born. By 2015, my mother, desperate for relief from her illness, invited a Mãe de Santo, a priestess from the Afro-Brazilian religion of Candomblé, to perform a cleansing ritual in our backyard, the very spot where most of the shadowy figures had been seen. As the ritual proceeded, the light bulbs in the back portion of the house began to explode. I don't mean they just burned out, they exploded. This was the first undeniable proof of the supernatural I had ever witnessed. My mother, surprisingly, felt better, but the experience left me terrified. A few months later, I had a dream that seemed supernatural, leading to a miracle that brought me back to Catholicism. After my first Mass, the strange occurrences in the house escalated. I finally saw the figures myself. The first one appeared as a gray, amorphous mass darting from the backyard towards the last bedroom. It was quick and formless, but I could sense its intelligence and personality. One afternoon, I saw a little girl running from one bedroom to another. She had bright blonde hair, fair skin, and wore a white lace dress. Knowing it wasn't my daughter, I followed the girl into the bedroom, only to find it empty. There was no trace of a child anywhere. Later I converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, and the supernatural events became even more intense. One day my daughter was playing in the very bedroom where the phantom girl had appeared. As I approached the room to check on her, the door suddenly slammed shut and locked. I heard my daughter's terrified screams from inside. The door was definitely locked, so in a fit of anger, I kicked it open. Thankfully, my daughter was unharmed. In an attempt to protect my family, I hung religious icons in the T-shaped corridor. The events diminished, but never completely stopped. For years, we would hear knocks on bedroom doors, loud bangs and footsteps where there should be none. We saw shadowy figures moving through the house, heavy metal doors slamming shut in our faces, and even felt hands shaking us awake at night. Some occurrences were almost comical, like the toilet seat lid mysteriously opening and closing on its own, as if some unseen entity was relieving itself. Even my daughter had her encounters. One night she woke up to go to the bathroom. While she was sitting on the toilet, she saw a tall, lanky gray figure with no eyes and a wide, sharp-toothed grin staring at her. When she blinked, it was gone. It could have been her imagination, but given our experiences, I didn't doubt her. The most unsettling event happened recently. My daughter was at a sleepover, and my wife and I were chatting in our bedroom. We were discussing about a young pregnant woman we knew when we both heard a woman's voice clearly saying, "You quiero a mi mamá." I want my mama. The voice seemed to come from within our walls, and it sounded like an adult trying to mimic a child's voice. I was furious and shouted back, "F you, I hate you, you'll lose anyway." To ensure we weren't hearing a neighbor or a TV, I checked with our neighbors. They were all outside in their front yard, 30 m away from where we heard the voice. I don't believe in ghosts in the conventional sense. As a devout Orthodox Christian, I believe our souls go either to heaven or hell. But I do believe in demons, entities that thrive on deception and fear. My family and I have experienced their presence firsthand in our home in Belém. These encounters have been both terrifying and enlightening, forcing me to confront the mysteries of the supernatural head-on. Stay safe and God bless.